While he was avoiding eye contact, I noticed the bulge of the broccoli that was visible. I don't know why, but I reached out and grabbed it with my hand. I started to squeeze it gently. As soon as I did, he couldn't hold it any longer and revealed the broccoli. He then lifted me up to the dining table, and the broccoli was now in my grasp. At first, it moved slowly back and forth. "Oh, hi, were you here?" he said. "I was just telling you about what we've been through. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand how things developed. My name is Mary. I am 54 years old, and I've been widowed for the past 2 summers. My late husband, Alfred, wasn't exactly the man of my dreams. I know that sounds harsh, but let's be honest. He was a difficult man, set in his ways, and burdened by his own disappointments for years. It wasn't always bad, but I grew tired of life with him. When he passed, to be honest, our marriage felt more like a duty than a romance. After he died, I thought that chapter of my life had closed. I wasn't seeking anything or anyone. I spent my days tending to my small garden, knitting in the evenings, and attending the usual family gatherings. Then Liam came. Liam is my late husband's grandson from his first marriage. He's 27 years old, tall, with piercing green eyes, and an intense, almost quiet presence. When he visited as a child, he was always polite but distant. However, that summer, he came to stay for a few weeks, a simple visit. He had stopped by on his way to visit his family in the countryside. The first few days passed without incident. Liam mostly kept to himself, exploring the nearby forests or reading books on the porch. I found myself watching him from the kitchen window, not in a strange way, just observing. There was something different about him. There was a sadness about him, as if he were searching for something he couldn't name. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, I was struggling with an old wooden fence that needed repair. Liam offered to help. He didn't say much. He just picked up the tools and got to work. Watching him reminded me of a younger Alfred, strong, focused, determined. But where Alfred was always grumpy and distant, Liam was kind and attentive. As the days turned into weeks, we started spending more and more time together. He would sit on the porch with me in the evenings, sipping his tea as the sun sank below the horizon. We would talk about everything and nothing, our plans, my memories, the little things that make up a life. There was a comfort in his presence, a connection I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, I decided to clean the attic, an area that hadn't been touched since Alfred's death. Dust floated in the sun's rays as I sorted through the old boxes. Liam appeared at the door, his shirt sticking to his skin from the summer heat. He offered to help, and before I could protest, he was by my side, lifting a heavy chest as though it had no weight. We found a box full of old photos, and I couldn't stop smiling as I showed him pictures from my youth. He examined them carefully, stroking the edges with his fingers. "You're so beautiful," he said. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes that I couldn't understand. A mixture of curiosity, longing, and something deeper. The air between us grew heavy, thick with unspoken words. Then suddenly he kissed me, slowly, but with purpose. It was wrong. I pulled back reflexively, but did I want it? I don't know. This time he must have noticed my hesitation, because he pressed himself closer to me, as if he believed I had been waiting for this. I returned his kiss over and over again, losing myself in the moment. It felt endless, though perhaps it lasted only 5 minutes. He made the first move, his hands roaming over my body. I was wearing a cream-colored dress,
soft against my skin, but his gentle touch sent waves of sensation coursing from my toes to every part of me. As the intensity built, strange sounds escaped my lips, involuntary and raw. Hearing them, he seemed emboldened, unwilling to slow or stop. The bulge of his desire was undeniable, even through the fabric. My thoughts flickered briefly to Alfred, a flash of guilt I tried desperately to push away. When I instinctively began to pull back, he reached out, sliding his fingers into my space as if to anchor me there. In that moment, resistance gave way to a rush of uncontrollable longing. "Faster," I whispered, my voice trembling with need, and he obliged, moving faster and faster until a scream tore from my throat, echoing through the house. When it was over, I stood as if nothing had happened, smoothing out my dress and trying to compose myself. As I got to my feet,
Later
I
that
noticed the
evening,
dampness
as I
on the
stood in
wooden
the
floor.
kitchen preparing
It
dinner,
wasn't sweat.
I couldn't
It was
shake
something
the
else,
weight of his
something
gaze.
undeniable.
He sat at the table, fingers idly tracing patterns on the wood. When I turned and met his eyes, it felt as though the room had grown smaller, trapping us in an unbearable tension. My hands faltered, and the knife I was holding slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. He sprang to his feet to help. As I reached for the knife, his hand brushed against mine, the contact fleeting yet electric. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and careful, almost a whisper. I nodded, pulling my hand away as quickly as I could. I turned back to the vegetables, focusing on them with a single-minded intensity, but inside, I was unraveling. Something was shifting within me, something I couldn't name, let alone control. "We can't keep doing this," I said softly, my voice barely audible. He didn't respond. Instead, he just stood there, silent, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he closed the distance between us. I avoided his eyes, but my gaze fell, landed, on the unmistakable bulge in his pants. A surge of emotion, unbidden and overpowering, drove me to act. Without thinking, my hand reached out and grabbed the broccoli directly. I began to feel a slight tremor building within me. Sensing the shift, he could no longer hold back. Slowly, he unveiled the broccoli. Gently, he lifted me onto the dining table. The broccoli, now enclosed within its trap, began to move. At first, its rhythm was slow, swaying back and forth, sending waves of vibrations that rippled through both of us. The resonance carried beyond us, even making the wine glasses on the table quiver. The kisses we shared wrapped around us like vines, entwining our beings. Though our bodies were separate, in that moment, we were one soul. It didn't matter who we were, just two strangers surrendering to the pure joy of the moment. My breath quickened, and I became acutely aware of the vibrations emanating from the broccoli. I whispered words I barely understood, caught in the intensity of it all. Hot droplets flowed through the trap, carrying a rush of excitement that left me trembling. He pulled back suddenly, drawing in a deep, steadying breath. I did the same, my chest rising and falling in sync with his. The morning light seeped softly through the curtains, its warmth a gentle reminder of everything that had just unfolded. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind swirling with thoughts, fragments of what had passed. I could hear Liam moving quietly around the room, his boots scraping lightly against the wooden floor. Turning my head, I saw him seated at the edge of the bed, his back to me. His broad shoulders were tense, his posture stoic. By the door, his bag sat, already packed. My chest tightened as a lump rose in my throat. "Are you leaving?" I asked, my voice no louder than a whisper. He nodded, his hands pausing briefly as he tied his shoelaces. Yet he didn't turn around. "I think I should go back," he said softly. I sat up slowly, the sheet sliding down my back.
My throat was dry, but I managed to whisper, "Why?" Finally, he turned to face me. His green eyes, usually intense, now held a quiet softness. "Mary, you know why," he said, his voice heavy with sadness and quiet determination. "This can't go on. It's not right. You said it yourself." I felt a sharp ache in my chest, as if the air had been knocked out of me. Yes, I had said that just last night. I had tried to convince both of us that this couldn't last, that it was impossible. But now, with him standing there, ready to leave, I wasn't so sure. "But what if I don't want you to leave?" The words escaped before I could stop them. He froze, his gaze locking onto mine. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Then, slowly, he crossed the room and knelt in front of me, so we were eye to eye. "Mary," he said, his voice breaking just enough to betray the struggle he was feeling. "I care about you more than I should, but this isn't fair. Not to you, not to me. It's going to hurt both of us in the end." I reached out, my fingertips brushing against his cheek. "It already hurts," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I thought I was done feeling this way, Liam. I thought that part of me was gone. But you brought it back. You made me feel alive again." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch for the briefest moment. Then he took my hand in his warmth grounding me even as his words pierced through me. "You've made me feel things I didn't know I could," he admitted. "But staying here, letting this go on, it'll only make it harder for both of us." I nodded, even as tears welled in my eyes. I knew he was right, but that didn't make it any easier. "So, that's it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You're just going to walk away?" He stood, his movements slow and deliberate, as if
He grabbed his
fighting
bag
every
and slung it
instinct to
over his
stay.
shoulder, pausing for a moment at the door. "I'll go," he said softly, his voice tinged with hesitation. "But Mary, if you ever need me, you know where to find me." And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and the weight of silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had just stood. The house felt different now, quieter, emptier, as though his departure had drained it of something vital. But as I sat there, something unexpected began to stir inside me. Yes, Liam had left, and yes, it hurt more than I cared to admit. But he had also left me with something else, a reminder of who I was, of what I could still feel, of what I still wanted. I rose to my feet and walked to the window, my gaze following him as he disappeared down the path toward the forest. I pressed my hand against the glass, a bittersweet smile tugging at my lips. "Goodbye, Liam," I whispered, my voice trembling. "And thank you." In that moment, I knew I would carry this with me, this brief, impossible connection that had changed me in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Certainly, here are 10 moral takeaways from the story, focusing on its underlying themes and the complexity of human emotions and decisions. 1. The conflict between desire and morality. The story highlights the internal struggle between fulfilling personal desires and adhering to moral principles, showing how easily emotions can blur ethical boundaries. 2. The consequences of betrayal. Betraying a commitment or a partner, Alfred in this case, can lead to feelings of guilt, regret, and long-term emotional consequences. 3. The importance of communication. Honest and open communication is vital in relationships. Unspoken feelings or unresolved tension can lead to actions that hurt everyone involved. The power of self-awareness. Recognizing and acknowledging one's feelings,
even if they are messy or contradictory, is a crucial step toward understanding oneself and making healthier choices. Fifth, temptation's grip. Temptation, when left unchecked, can drive individuals to make impulsive decisions that they may later regret. 6. The fragility of relationships. The story illustrates how fragile relationships can be when trust is broken or when deeper, unspoken issues are ignored. 7. The cost of acting on impulse. Acting impulsively, particularly in emotionally charged situations, can lead to actions that have unintended and far-reaching consequences. 8. Emotional growth through pain. Even in heartbreak or guilt, there is room for personal growth. The character's experiences serve as a reminder that mistakes can teach valuable lessons about boundaries and respect. 9. The duality of human nature. The characters reflect the duality of human nature, how people can feel both love and guilt, passion and restraint, desire and regret at the same time. 10. The need for accountability. Taking responsibility for one's actions, instead of avoiding or denying them, is essential for personal and relational healing.